There exists a form of execution so horrifying that even describing it feels like trespassing into madness. To be hanged, drawn, and quartered was not merely to die. It was to be unmade, body and soul, in a spectacle designed to terrify a nation into obedience. This punishment stood apart even in an age steeped in violence. It was England's ultimate sentence for high treason, the deliberate destruction of a person's body, reputation, and very memory. Every stage carried meaning. Every cut, every flame, every scream was crafted to declare one truth. The Crown's justice was absolute. Make sure to subscribe for more untold stories from humanity's shadowed past. What follows is not just a story of death, but of power, faith, and fear, an anatomy of cruelty that reveals how a state could turn execution into theater and suffering into law. The punishment of being hanged, drawn, and quartered emerged in medieval England, where treason was seen not just as rebellion, but as blasphemy against God's chosen ruler. The first recorded victim was William de Morisco in 1242, but the ritual took full form in 1283 with the execution of Dafydd ap Gruffudd, the last native prince of Wales. His death set the template: to be dragged, hanged, disemboweled, beheaded, and quartered, each act symbolizing the total destruction of a traitor. In 1351, King Edward III's Treason Act formalized this sequence. It defined high treason with chilling clarity: conspiring against the monarch, aiding his enemies, or waging war against the crown, and prescribed this punishment as the price. The sentence was read in measured tones, as though routine: that the condemned be drawn on a hurdle, hanged by the neck, cut down alive, his bowels burned before him, his head severed, and his body divided into 4 parts. For centuries, this was not merely law, it was ceremony. Justice turned into theater, cruelty elevated to ritual. Every stage of the execution carried purpose. Drawing dragged the traitor from society. Hanging stole the life he had threatened. Disembowelment exposed his inner corruption. Beheading silenced rebellion. Quartering scattered his memory. This was punishment as message, designed to make loyalty visible through fear. In an age when few could read, the mutilated body became the monarch's proclamation. Even so-called mercy had meaning. Women were spared this spectacle, not out of compassion, but for public decency. Instead, they were burned alive, their deaths equally public and symbolic. To medieval rulers, cruelty was not excess, it was order. Terror was policy, and pain was proof that the king's justice reached beyond death itself. The ordeal began long before the gallows. The condemned spent his final night in a cold cell, haunted by the knowledge of what awaited him. No swift death, but a slow unraveling. At dawn, he was tied to a wooden hurdle and dragged through the streets, scraped over cobblestones as crowds jeered or watched in silence. This drawing turned the journey itself into humiliation, a public stripping of dignity. By the time he reached the scaffold, often at Tyburn, he was broken and bleeding, yet thousands gathered to witness it. Merchants selling food, children lifted to see the show. The condemned might try to speak, to plead, to defy, but the rope always answered louder than words. Unlike ordinary hangings meant to break the neck instantly, this was a strangulation drawn out to the edge of death. The rope was deliberately short, ensuring the prisoner's body remained suspended in agony rather than snapped into silence. As the crowd watched, the condemned kicked and convulsed, his face turning purple, eyes bulging, tongue protruding. Air vanished, but consciousness lingered, just enough for him to feel himself dying without release. The executioner's skill was crucial. He had to judge the precise moment to cut the rope, reviving the victim for the horrors that followed. When the limp body hit the scaffold, gasping and half-conscious, the true punishment had only just begun. Once cut down, the condemned was stripped before the crowd. What followed was not chaos, but choreography. The emasculation came first, a symbolic destruction of manhood and honor. The severed parts were tossed into a nearby fire while the victim still breathed. Then came the disembowelment, the most excruciating act of all. The executioner opened the abdomen with precision, pulling out the organs one by one as the crowd watched. Some victims reportedly remained conscious, gasping prayers or curses as their entrails burned beside them. Finally, the head was severed, often with more than one stroke, and lifted high to the roar of the crowd. Behold the head of a traitor. The corpse was then quartered, its limbs hacked apart with brutal efficiency. What remained of the traitor would soon become instruments of warning, scattered across the realm like grim signposts of obedience. Death was not the end of the sentence. The executioner's work continued with grim precision. The body parts were parboiled in salt and spices, both to slow decay and to ready them for public display. The head, blackened by smoke, was mounted on a pike above London Bridge, where it would rot in the open air for all to see. Each quarter of the body was sent to different cities, York, Bristol, Newcastle, Carlisle, hung from gates or castle walls as proof that royal justice reached everywhere. Travelers passed beneath these grisly relics, reminded that treason had a price not measured in gold or time, but in flesh. In an era without newspapers, this was the kingdom's news. Every severed limb was a headline, every decomposing face a proclamation of the crown's absolute power. The executioner was both killer and performer, trained to prolong life just long enough for each stage of suffering. He managed timing, anatomy, and crowd, turning punishment into theater. His tools, rope, knife, axe, and fire, had to work flawlessly, for a single mistake could ruin the spectacle. Reputation mattered. A skilled executioner was feared yet respected, sometimes traveling between cities for important deaths. In his precision, the state found its most chilling ally, a man whose craft made cruelty look like order. Few punishments in history created legends like those condemned to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. In 1606, Guy Fawkes and his fellow gunpowder plot conspirators faced this fate after trying to blow up Parliament. Weakened by torture, Fawkes leapt from the gallows, breaking his neck and sparing himself the worst. Yet his body was still quartered, his name burned into England's memory. 3 centuries earlier, William Wallace, hero of Scottish resistance, endured the full ordeal in 1305. Dragged through London, hanged until near death, then mutilated and quartered, he became the very martyr England sought to erase. His scattered remains ignited rebellion instead of extinguishing it. Another victim, Hugh Despenser the Younger, suffered in 1326, a punishment so vicious it shocked even his contemporaries. Rumors of his closeness to King Edward II fueled the cruelty, his skin carved with verses, a crown of nettles pressed to his head, his body mutilated alive. For others, especially Catholic priests in the 1500s and 1600s, the same death became martyrdom. Men like John Houghton and Oliver Plunkett faced the scaffold praying for their executioners. The crowd came to witness justice. Some left believing they had seen saints die. The short hanging suffocated without mercy. The disembowelment burned while life remained. Yet the mind died first, broken by days of knowing what was to come. Public execution was theater, and the crowd was its audience. Thousands gathered, buying food and drink as they watched a man die. The monarchy needed these eyes. Fear spread faster when seen. Yet the crowd's reaction was unpredictable. Some cheered, others fell silent or turned away. A brave death could stir pity, even admiration. Each gasp and cry became part of the performance, proof that terror worked best when shared. Meant to deter treason, the punishment failed. Rebels rose, martyrs endured. By the 1700s, its spectacle repelled more than it warned. By 1870, it was gone. Yet hanged, drawn, and quartered still echoes as a symbol of cruelty. London's scaffolds have vanished, but the memory endures, a reminder that when justice becomes theatre, mercy disappears. This punishment made terror a language of rule. Its echoes remind us that when justice serves fear, cruelty lives on,